I'd like to introduce Brad Gorman presenting IRR Spring Cleaning, which I hear isn't actually out of season this time of year. Brad is the Senior Product Owner for Routing Security at ARIN. This is Brad's first time speaking at NANOG, and we're certainly happy to have him speaking with us today. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you, Chris, for the introduction, and thank you, John, for no spoilers. My name is Brad Gorman. As Chris said, I'm the Senior Product Owner for Routing Security here at ARIN. I am the face of these products, IRR, RPKI, DNSSEC. If you ever need to reach me, find me in the hallway, I might be at the bar next to John. But ARIN also has a meeting room off to the side of this stage here. So please feel free to stop by. And again, I'll be here till Friday. Next slide. Maybe. Thank you. Okay, so the agenda that I want to put forth today, again, we're talking about the Internet Routing Registry. What is it, and then how is it used? Why is it still important, and why is it relevant? Go into the different types of objects that are available to operators to create and to enter their records into the IRR databases. Explain how those objects are used, and then give a sense of what's coming and go a little bit further into what John was referring to with the changes in the ARIN non-authenticated IRR sunset, let's call it that. Next slide, please. So essentially, there are a number of routing security data sets. RPKI is, let's call it the new shiny. It's the newest arrival, but for the better part of 22, 23 years, the IRR has been a bellwether, stalwart method of allowing an operator to identify the product, the resources that they have, and basically pass on that information to the greater internet in a way that is more open and openly available. And then there's everything else. Basically, since the days BGP was announced, that was what we had in the beginning. So let's go ahead and move forward. Next slide. So what is the IRR? Well, the IRR is an ecosystem run by no one individual, one company. It's not overly regulated in the sense that there are rules and specific methods that have to be followed from one database operator to another. Next slide, please. So I unfortunately will read this entire definition for those who may or may not know what the IRR is. The Internet Routing Registry, or IRR, is a distributed routing database development effort. The data from the IRR may be used by anyone worldwide to help debug, configure, and engineer Internet routing and addressing. The IRR provides a mechanism for validating the contents of BGP announcement messages or mapping an origin ASN number to a list of networks. There's a whole lot of words there. There's maybe some confusion there. So next slide. I have my own definition of what the IRR is, and that is it's a way to share information about you and your customers with the other network operators out in the internet. Next slide, please. So what is the IRR really all about? Essentially, it is there to provide directions to get to the destination you want. It's the destination you want operators on the network to come to get to your content or the content of your customers. Now, we all made travel reservations to get here. We all made sure that we booked the sunny, warm trade winds of Minneapolis to get here. But in a sense, the IRR works the same way. You go and you look at this large information, a database listed, that has your flights and your times, and you get here just by virtue of someone else making the announcement that here's the way to get to the plane, the flight, and get to your ultimate destination. Next slide. So there are two ways, two different mindsets of IRR databases and organizations that run IRR databases on the internet. They can be validated or not validated. Let me go a little bit into that. So most of the IRR databases that exist today, of which there's more than 20 run by different organizations, do not have a method or vehicle with which to confirm or authenticate, validate that the information in the object, in that record in the database, is in fact true. There's nothing stopping an individual from creating a record in a third-party database and claim a prefix should be coming from their ASN. There's no way to restrict that. Let me give you an analogy. Some of us hopefully are fans of a professional sports team. And when that team signs a new star player, everybody goes out and gets their own new jersey with the name and the number on the back. Very proud. But over time, this individual will want to make more money and will transfer to a different team somewhere else in another city. But you are still a fan of that person, and you are still a fan of your team. Your team affiliation didn't change. So you now have a jersey that isn't exactly accurate. You have the person's name, but you're identifying a different team. So maybe your information in this case, it's a little stale or arguably incorrect. However, if you wanted to get a jersey for your star player that you like to follow, but you don't want to make sure, you don't have the wherewithal to pay the hefty fee to get the jersey from the team directly, there's somebody that's out there in the parking lot when you're tailgating who'll give you a sham shirt. It may or not be genuine. Arguably, it probably isn't. And that same mindset works in the IRR. There's information that when it was created, it was good. And over time, that information and its legitimacy has kind of faded. And there are people out there that are doing malicious things in the IRR, and we need to be aware of that. So what is the flip side? The flip side is a validated database, a database in which the resource holders have been given the rights to use internet number resources from the IRRs, or the RIRs, excuse me. And the RIRs are the only ones that have the ability to confirm that organization X has been allocated these blocks and can assure everyone who looks at an authenticated database that the data is correct. Next slide, please. So what is the database made of? The database is made of records, and they're called objects. Now, I want to go through a few of the objects that are most commonly used and give an explanation of how they work. Next slide, please. So the first of which is called the route object, and the route object is the fundamental building block of the IRR. It's information that basically states this route, this prefix should be coming from this ASN. This is the way it needs to go. About 80% of the records inside of Aaron's database are route objects. Clearly, the most used bit of information that operators like you will put into the IRR. And don't forget, IPv6 is a thing. So if it's a route object, it could be a Route 6 object. Thank you. Next slide, please. So here's an example of a route object. I run the Sesame Street ISP. Hi, my name's Ernie. I have a prefix that has been given to me by Aaron in this case, and I have an ASN. And I put this information in this route object to say, this is where you want to go to get to my prefix. Now there's optional information, in this case a descriptions field, where you can put whatever you choose. You don't have to put them in, but you can give as much information as you choose so that it is useful to people who are going to look at your record. Now, in the case of Aaron, I wanted to call out something here. the maintainer of a record inside of the database is directly linked to the organization name. So MNT SSISP is the Sesame Street ISP organization name. Just want to call it out. Next slide, please. The next most commonly used object or created object is the Autonom object, and that is clear. This represents a single AS and you know the policies associated with it that you want to create. So it is it can range from simple to very complex, given the amount of specifics and data that you want to put into your object. But essentially, it is telling who you want to talk to and who you want to know of information that is associated with your ASN. Next slide, please. So here's the example of an Autonom object. Again, my ASN 65501 or 64501, excuse me, is associated with my ISP and ISP. And it gives the opportunity for operators to pull this information and put it into their policy and say, hey, the ENS ISP is this ASN. It is descriptive rather than just a number. And I can make a statement about who am I going to listen to and who I am going to pass my information along to inside of this autonomous system, this Autonom object. It's optional. You don't need to put that there, but it gives you a more granular knob to use to put inside of the database. Next slide, please. AS set. So exactly what it sounds like. You now have an AS object that you can put in multiple ASNs, and it gives you a way to identify a single element with many different components buried within it. You can use it to categorize, for example, all your customer networks. Next. So here's something that starts to look familiar. You have the ASN, but I have now a group of Sesame Street ISP customers, SSIP, that represents the ASNs of Cookie Monster's Bakery and Oscar's Trash Service. And people out distant don't need to know that. They just need to reference the SSISP customer record. I maintain it, and everyone else just can move along. Next slide, please. Finally, there's the route set object. Again, very similar to AS set. You can group together prefixes under one record to reduce the complexity of the overall databases, and it gives you, the creator of the object, the opportunity to have one location where you need to do updates if your customer base changes. Next slide, please. So here's a final example. Again, you know, I am Sesame Street customers. Here are the member prefixes of my child customers information. And all I need to do is, if I add a new customer or remove or lose one, I just remove one of those member prefixes, and everything else remains the same in your policy, your filtering that you put in place. Next slide, please. Great. So you've created your objects. Now what do you do with them? This tool is a great way to get beyond the buddy system of networking. Early on, all we could do was expect or hope that the network that connected up to you was giving you valid information about what was beyond them. You can talk to your direct peer, but 3 hops down the way, you have no information and no method with which to communicate with those people to understand what they want you to know. So this is how you get it done. Next slide, please. Inside of the databases themselves, there are methods with which you can pull, inside. There are methods with which you can pull information in all of the IRR databases that will assist in a way of a close to real-time or real-time monitoring for your filters. You can build them and it will be relatively seamless and move forward, and you don't have to go back and revisit your filters every time a change is made. Alternatively, you can pull the information down from any of these databases on one fell swoop, download it, and then rebuild overnight, for example. And the records are created and updated immediately, but if you don't want or need a real-time fix, then that full download of the database is useful to you. Once you download that information, just decide what you want to use and where you want to put it. Since there are so many databases that have either different or copies of information from one or the other, you can select which information source you plan to use to end up creating your filters. Thanks. So I'm going to self-serve myself a little bit here. And John started to allude to this when he was up here a few minutes ago. Aaron runs 2 different IRR databases. One has been around, is very long in the tooth. There is information that is in it that has been aged out, long forgotten. People don't know it's even there. People who created them don't work there or are in the industry anymore. And we need, with the title of the presentation, we need to clean up this information and make the IRR relevant once again. Next slide, please. So way back when, Aaron, as one of the IRRs, ran and continues to run an unvalidated or an unauthenticated, non-authenticated IRR database. It was, as stated before, it was an alternative to hoping that the operators down the way were getting the information to you that you wanted to see, but there was no guarantee. And the IRR gave the opportunity for those distant operator networks to give more useful or more valid, more readily available information to people further out from them. So it really was the first opportunity and the first big step towards providing routing security beyond what was just available to BGP in and by itself. Fundamentally, things haven't changed since these databases were first created all those years ago. Incrementally, Aaron updated information. Incrementally, Aaron updated ways to enter and remove records from the databases. But essentially, it looks the same as it did way back when FHIR was invented. The IRR doesn't really look any different, other than there's a whole lot more records than originally were put in place. But the membership of Aaron asked for something new, and this is what we came up with. Next slide, please. So Aaron's authenticated IRR was requested through our suggestion processes at Aaron, and we came up with a solution that provided a completely new build of the IRR as it was compared to what we had previously been running versus this new authenticated. It was internally developed. It gave a full integration, or we built full integration to our online Aaron Online tool. It gave us the API where you programmatically could just access and pull the information that wasn't available before. And previously, all of the updates were through a mail interface, which is great, but it wasn't what was being asked for, and it wasn't what should be available today. So in June of last year, the Aaron authenticated database came online. Well received, everyone was thankful for it, and we have continued to do incremental development on the features and capabilities of this database, and we are listening to our community, our membership, to say, please tell us more of what you want to see. Are there enhancements you would like? And definitely come to me, and I will bring those requests back to Aaron, and we can work on development and get the get fixes or implement the new features that you're asking for. And like I said, it gives us multiple ways, or gives you multiple ways to get the data in and out of the database. Wow, John, it really gave me a lot of time. Next slide, please. So Aaron doesn't want to run two databases, clearly. We don't want to have a repository of information that we know is full of questionable or otherwise completely incorrect data. The non-authentic database is still growing, and we certainly don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that people who create their records are going to get them installed in a location that could be identified as this is good info. You don't have to question where it came from. It is information that has been checked by Aaron to be true, that the creator of the object is in fact the organization that is the receiver of the resource that's being created. And that opportunity isn't available to other IRR operators, save the other RIRs. Next slide, please. So it's time to say goodbye. In March of this year, Aaron, had a consultation with the community where we solicited your feedback. We shared our plans with what we were going to do with this database we want to stop providing the data stream from. Originally, September 30th was the date, and 6 months was very quickly rejected as a time frame to have people prepare. So we agreed that we would give 12 months for everyone to be made aware, give them the opportunity to be prepared, and then Aaron would move forward and stop the announcement of this database. But March 31st, 2022 is coming. It's coming faster than what many people have believed, and it's only 154 days away, if my math is right. There are many organizations that really don't have a lot of records in the database, but there are a few that have many records in the database. We've been doing our research, and these operators have records only in Aaron's database. So you can imagine if the data stream stops for 65,000 objects in our database that don't already have a new location, a new database to have this data entered, it's going to cause some problems. So please pay attention, make plans. Now, after March, we sent out notifications of the intent for this shutdown, and it was sent to all of Aaron's technical points of contact and the administrative points of contact. We got more kickbacks than we did positive answers from people. So it is imperative that our communications team relays. We send additional methods or different ways of getting this information out. People really need to prepare. The deadline is coming. So moving forward, we will continue to have additional emails going out, which unfortunately we know has not been very useful at this point, but we sometimes have no other means of getting in contact with people who are responsible for running an organization. So if you haven't done so in a while, please go log into your account, verify your email address, and then pay attention, take a look, and see what's there. So there's some pretty interesting information, I'm sure, in your inbox on your Aaron Online account. Next slide, please. What do we need to do? Aaron is here to help you. Don't be bashful. Ask for help. If you don't understand why you got that email saying you have records in our non-auth database, reach out to us. We can help clear that up. We can help you take a look at your objects that are in the database, and maybe they really aren't pertinent anymore. We can get rid of them. And then you can forget about it and say, Y2K can come. I'll be okay. Or in this case, April 1st, 2022. And it's not going to be an April Fool's joke. It's going away. So take the time, look at the alternatives that you have. If you want to take the steps to get information in the ARIN validated database, we can help you do that. If you want to pick a different location where to put your information, feel free to do so. Just make a plan and follow through with it is what I want to make sure that everyone hears. You will continue to hear it from me over the next 6 months. So please, if you want help, ask. We are here. If you know what you want to do, please go forth and do it. And anything in between that, we want to make sure that our actions on March 31st don't cause any of you or the greater community any issue. Next slide. That's all I have. And do you have any questions?
I heard you say that you have done research to see which records only exist in the ARIN non-auth IRR. Is that true? And have you identified the percentage of those records of the total database?
Yes, we have. Just recently, we pulled the information out as we noted an increase in the number of records, unfortunately, that were in there. There are 2 organizations that will remain nameless that are responsible for 68% of the records in the database, just 2. One of them is responsible for 62,000 of them. Now, individually—
And they only have their records in the ARIN database?
Yes, we've done searches through RADB, for example, and there are no other records that RADB either has directly in their database or mirrored from somewhere else. So there are many, many, many thousands, tens of thousands of objects that only exist in the ARIN non-auth database, and they continue to grow.
And are we looking at trying to contact the networks that are actually announcing these records via the current ARIN point of contacts for those ASNs, so that maybe the record itself has a dead contact information in it, but maybe the AS for the network that is actually announcing them is correct? So doing the next level of database lookup to see if we can actually get someone to look at the record who is actually announcing it now, and then just make a informed decision about what they want to do with the database.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the top record holders in the database are well-known organizations that we do have direct contacts with. And we have reached out to the top 10 proactively and communicated with them, telephone, Zoom, whatever method. We are working with them to develop their plan. Certainly have identified what their condition is as a result. One of them actually has come back and said, "Oh, that's okay. Let it all go away. I'm going to start my own database." Fantastic.
Okay. Right.
So no, we have been reaching out to the ones who will be impacted the most. But like I was saying, there are a number of organizations that have data that have been out there for 15 years that just it's old and stale. People don't know about it. Microphone in the middle of the room.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. 2 questions. Do you have an idea of what the total percentage of IP space that Aaron has is off today?
Don't directly have that. I can't give you a clear answer of what the full resource use of the Aaron allocated addresses that they have, that they're responsible for, is in the authenticated database. It's actually a lookup that we haven't pulled off, so it's something I can definitely look into. But the number of objects in the authenticated database are twice the size of the non-auth database, which is promising, and that is growing as well. But no, I don't have a clear answer to that first question.
I think it's important for the community to have an idea of how we're improving. Auth is critical. Non-auth is bad. Auth is critical. And if we don't know how we're improving as a community, we're going to have problems. Okay. Second question, are you able to, in the Aaron Online auth system, to delegate a prefix so that a customer of mine who has a 24 as an example is able to maintain that 24 within my block? Or is it that I'm responsible for it solely?
So a lot of the information that ends up landing in the non-auth database is related to proxy objects. Many of them are proxy objects. If your customer is a member organization of Aaron, there is an opportunity to make that useful to you in the case of your customers, but I don't have a
No, the example is specific. Okay.
oh.
John Sweeting with Aaron. Yeah, if you have assigned, reassigned, or reallocated to your customer, they can manage their own objects as long as it's under RSA or LRSA by you. That's the answer.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. So that would address the proxy scenario. As long as I'm maintaining my records correctly, delegating them to my customers, they don't need to be a non-auth. They can deal with it in auth.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a handful of questions from remote participants. I will start at the top here. Maybe more than a handful here, but we've got about 10 minutes. I'll start with a question from Michael Doherty, who is an Aaron resource holder. The question is, does this not overlap with some of what RPKI is supposed to accomplish?
There's a lot of truth to that. The component of a route object looks very similar to a ROA in RPKI. It's a prefix and an ASN, and this is where, I'm in the RPKI terms, I am making an attestation that this prefix should be coming from this ASN. The main difference between those two methods of authenticating a prefix is the cryptographic chain of events through RPKI, where those routes are validated as being true. The RIR says it's good, and then gets all the way to the organization who is making decisions on the ROAs, the RPKI information that it gets, and does that comparison to BGP. That's not something that is available to a user of the IRR. There is no check and balance that is available in RPKI.
All right, thanks. Next remote question. This is from Matt Pitak, unaffiliated. And Matthew says, Brad, couldn't a similar objective be accomplished excuse me, by putting expiration entries on records, requiring them to be revalidated periodically, and expiring records that aren't periodically refreshed, rather than throwing the entire baby out with the bathwater? We do the same thing with POC records that must be periodically revalidated. Why not do the same thing with the IRR data?
That's a good question. In reference to POC data, certainly there is a very tight linkage between an organization whose paying that, those fees to be, part of the ARIN community to get those resources. But if those organizations by themselves don't either check the information that they have already put in, or listen to and pay attention to the messaging that's put out, our method, or if we follow the method to say, hey, let's kick off a refresh of this information, and it needs to be either checked by the people who put it in as being true, or it's no longer useful, go ahead and take it out. I mean, that's something that's available to those points of contact today, and they're not doing it. So the question is, if ARIN were to automatically pull those out, would that not be akin to ARIN tearing ROAs out? It's not something that we I personally would ever look into doing. And the development that would be associated with doing that is not, it's not desirable, because we're trying to get rid of it anyway. We don't want to try to maintain what we're trying to get rid of. So, no.
Okay, thanks. Next question is from, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Gus Schlickman, who is with a private-owned company in the financial sector. And the question is, could you please summarize what the steps are to migrate to IRR auth? What's the process?
The easiest answer that I could give someone who has questions like that would be reach out to our help desk, because there are arguably a number of people that want to do that. The process would be find your records that are in the non-auth, and then you need to understand what were the circumstances that got it there. Was it not tied to an existing org ID, or maybe those resources used to be with an older org, there's been an acquisition of address space. And I know this may not be your particular case, but the only way that it can be done is identify what your non-auth record is before you can clearly state how to get it fixed.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Tony Tauber with Comcast. Could ARIN make route or Route 6 objects for things that in ARIN's hosted RPKI? That could simplify some things.
So there are development efforts in flow at ARIN right now. And Tony, that is one thing that we're looking into. The tighter linkage between the two routing security options of IR and RPKI. Certainly there's understanding and probably easy acceptance to say, I'm creating a ROA, please create an IRR record, and all the valid information that goes into the validated IRR. Certainly the flip side of it is, I've created an IRR object, create a ROA. Well, there's any number of roadblocks to doing that. The organization needs to already be signed up and running RPKI to be able to do something like that. But to answer your question, Tony, yes, we're looking into doing things like that. And if you have any asks, please reach out.
All right, thanks. One last question looks like from the remote queue. This is from Michael Doherty again. Will ARIN remove or deallocate non-validated or non-responsive holder resources? How will prefix, ASN, etc.? How will that be enforced or implemented?
Simple answer is no, we're not going to use this to revoke resources. No.
All right. I think that is all of our questions. So thank you, Brad, for your time today.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone.